Hello, I'm Congressman Biلیراکیس, and it's a pleasure to be with you today as part of your Free Iran Global Summit 2021. I'm the co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Caucus and a member of the Executive Committee of the Continental Human Rights Commission. I have fought throughout my congressional career to protect the most basic and fundamental rights for people around the globe who are persecuted and discriminated against by oppressive governments. I'm honored to be here with you today in this virtual global forum, and next year hopefully we'll be face-to-face. But I want to declare my support for democracy and human rights in Iran and express my solidarity with the Iranian people. Iranians have endured a lot in the past 40 years, from brutal suppression and trampling of their basic rights to losing many of their children during peaceful street protests. Iran has been destabilizing, and it's been a destabilizing and an antagonizing force in the Middle East for a long time. Iran has repeatedly proven itself to be an untrustworthy, aggressive state sponsor of terrorism. We need independent investigations into the Iranian regime's past and present terrorist attacks against U.S. citizens and Iranian exiles. The Iranian regime has engaged in persecution against religious minorities for decades, and these unacceptable violations have only intensified and worsened with time, unfortunately. Religious freedom is the most basic fundamental human right, and it must be protected. While daily examples abound of other human rights violations, I'm particularly troubled by the events that began on November 15, 2019, when popular protests against the Iranian regime began and rapidly spread to at least throughout the country. Reports indicate that Iranian security forces used lethal force, and about 1,500 people were killed during less than 2 weeks of unrest, and thousands more were detained during these protests. We must empower the people of Iran in their efforts to create a more open, democratic government that is accountable to those it serves. And it is best for everyone if Iran remains without nuclear capabilities. The time has come for a new approach in how we interact with Iran. Iran must be held accountable for its bad behavior, and the U.S. must take a firm stance that further misconduct will no longer be tolerated. I'm proud to be one of the original co-sponsors of H.R. 118, which expresses support for the Iranian people's desire for a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear republic. This resolution had overwhelming bipartisan support in the United States Congress, which demonstrates the will of the representatives of the American people in supporting a democratic Iran. Iran has a rich history, and the people of Iran deserve a representative government that works for them and has their well-being in mind. The current rulers in Iran are more interested in imposing their fundamentalist ideology on the people than providing for their basic needs. They have shown repeatedly that their number one priority is to export fundamentalism and spread of their hegemony over the region, and not the well-being of their people. The U.S. policy vis-a-vis our unwavering support for establishment of a democratic Iran. Again, thank you for inviting me to speak with you today and for your advocacy to bring about a positive change in Iran. We must not go back. We must continue to empower the oppressed and ensure that their voices are not silenced under this difficult time. The United States will always stand with those fighting for the right to free speech and democracy. We will continue to stand with Iranian citizens until their goal of a free and democratic society becomes a reality. And of course, they deserve nothing less. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
everyone. First off, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me to address this important event today. I'm honored to join my colleagues in Congress and folks around the world in expressing my support for a democratic and secular Iran. In Congress, I'm working to support peace and stability in the Middle East by co-sponsoring H.R. 118, a resolution that's stating in no uncertain terms that the U.S. Congress is on the side of the Iranian people in the ongoing struggle to bring fundamental and lasting change to your home country. In co-sponsoring that resolution, I stand alongside members of both parties in condemning the human rights abuses of the Iranian regime, including their violent actions to suppress a democratic protest movement in 2019, which resulted in the deaths of nearly 1,500 innocent Iranians. To this day, countless Iranians are in custody for the simple crime of expressing their desire for a true and open democracy. The United States must continue working to hold this regime accountable for its hostile and unlawful behavior, both against its own citizens and across the globe. I believe the Iranian people should determine the future of Iran and stand by those brave folks who bravely stood up against the regime to demand basic freedoms for their countrymen. Freedom and democracy in Iran is achievable, and I commend you for your steadfast struggle for freedom. Thank you all for your hard work and advocacy and for your commitment to a free Iran. Have a great rest of your day.
Kریگ.
Hi, I'm Congressman Eshnایدر. I am so pleased to address your conference this year, and I want to thank all of you for being here today, especially in the light of the recent election in Iran, an election that was anything but free and fair. Your activism and engagement is critical for holding Iran and countries across the world accountable not only to their citizens, but also for human rights. Throughout my whole career in Congress, I have advocated for the United States government to hold Iran accountable for its reprehensible human rights abuses and its intolerance of political opposition. In 2019, 1,500 people died while protesting the Iranian regime in what became the deadliest crackdown in 1979. The tragedy was sadly not an isolated incident. The 2019 crackdown was part of a decades-long history of the Iranian regime's abuse of its own people. It is essential that we memorialize the thousands of Iranians who have lost their lives over the past decades. The United States must always stand with those who exercise their political rights. The Middle East and the entire world will benefit from a democratic Republic of Iran that respects freedoms we all hold so near and dear. We must continue doing everything we can to speak out against Iran's human rights abuses and hold the regime to account. This also includes preventing Iran from ever acquiring a nuclear weapon. Because of Iran's support of Hezbollah and other terrorist proxies, it is imperative that the United States and our allies work together to keep nuclear weapons out of Iran. So once again, thank you for the awareness you bring to Iranian struggle for freedom and for lending a voice to the voiceless. I stand with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Emmer, and I represent Minnesota's 6th Congressional District. Thank you for inviting me to join your summit today. I'm proud to stand with all of you in your mission for a free and democratic Iran. We come together today with shared goals: an end to repression, an end to persecution, and an end to terror. As all of you know, so-called President Ibrahim Raisi is not the true choice of the Iranian people. Far from it. Nor will he bring them a better future. But we must not lose hope. The challenges ahead should not discourage us, but instead should strengthen our resolve. This year, I again co-sponsored a resolution in the U.S. House of Representatives condemning the state-sponsored terrorism that has plagued Iran for decades and expressing support for the Iranian people's desire for a democratic, non-nuclear republic. Together, we can look forward to the day when all Iranians will be able to live without fear. Thank you for your hope for a free Iran and for your hard work toward making this goal a reality. And thank you again for letting me join you today.
Hello to all of you participating in the 2021 Free Iran Global Summit. I'm honored to participate in this year's summit in support of a democratic and free Iran. For the past 4 decades, the people of Iran have lived under the brutal dictatorship of the Ayatollahs in Tehran. The Ayatollahs, the mullahs, and the Iranian military are all profiting at the expense of ordinary Iranian citizens who've shown their longing for a government that respects the rule of law and supports the people over international terrorists. The Iranian people are rightfully calling for greater accountability. No one should live under tyranny and be exploited by their own government. The Iranian people want change, and they've been advocating for freedom and democracy. Sadly, thousands have been killed and millions imprisoned because of their views and their efforts to promote human rights and dignity. This behavior should not be tolerated, and I condemn the actions of this tyrannical regime. I stand with the people of Iran. America stands with the people of Iran. In this Congress, I'm a proud co-sponsor of H-Res 118, which expresses our support for the people of Iran who are engaged in legitimate and peaceful protests against the Iranian regime. Freedom and democracy in Iran are achievable, and I commend the Organization of Iranian American Communities for your work towards achieving a democratic and free Iran. America stands for freedom, and I stand with the people of Iran as they peacefully protest in the streets, demanding the basic freedoms we so often take for granted here in the United States.
Congressman Pete Sessions and I stand today after a great meeting that I had with the Iranian expats. The new president is a man who has been a part of the brutal thuggery that takes place not only in Iran, but around the world. So I stand with these expats and say, keep the solemn vision and viewpoint to support people back in Iran to make sure they know that America, the United States Congress, stands with them. H-Res 118 is just one example of our fight to make sure that the world knows, as we isolate Iran for what they are, that they are brutal dictators who will kill their own people for the sake of their own power. So, thank you for taking time with me. Let's never forget the struggle that takes place and stand behind our Iranian friends who will stand against this terrible regime in Tehran.
Hello, everyone. My name is Congressman Dr. Rauel Ruiz. I'm an emergency medicine physician and public health expert, and I represent Southern California's 36th Congressional District. I am also the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and it is a true honor to be with you for this year's Free Iran Conference. Standing up for the human rights of the people of Iran is not only necessary but vital to helping ensure that the Iranian people know that America and all peace-loving people stand with them in their pursuit of liberty, democracy, and a peaceful Iran. That is why I am a strong supporter of HRES 118, which underlines a plan to promote a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear Republic of Iran. This resolution condemns past and present Iranian state-sponsored terrorist attacks against United States citizens and officials, as well as Iranian dissidents. This resolution stands with the people of Iran who are continuing to hold legitimate and peaceful protests against an oppressive and corrupt regime. The House must pass HRES 118 to send this clear message to the Iranian people. The American people stand with you. The Iranian people have spoken, and the United States has heard you and stands with you in solidarity. Know that we will continue supporting you as you pursue your basic rights, freedom, and democracy. I applaud you for convening this gathering today to let the world know that the majority of the United States Congress condemns Iran's malignant behavior in the region and supports the people's rights for freedom and liberty. To the Iranian people seeking freedom, democracy, and human rights, I stand with you. The United States Congress stands with you, and the American people stands with you. Thank you.
All those gathered at the free, secular, non-nuclear and Republican Iran conference that's being held. This is United States Congresswoman Nikole Maliatakis, and I wanted to thank you for coming together to advocate for a free Iran. You know, what happened in this election was very disturbing to not only those who want a free Iran, but to those all around the world that care about liberty and human rights. The election of Raisi, somebody who has United States sanctions against him, someone who is responsible for the death of thousands of Iranians who were just advocating for their own rights and freedom, is very disturbing. And so we need to continue to join together to demand that Iran release United States hostages, that they improve human rights, and certainly that the Biden administration does not re-enter any Iranian deal or lift sanctions. We will continue as members of the Foreign Affairs Committee to advocate for this. As a member of this committee, I have been at the forefront of co-sponsoring legislation and resolutions that would do just this. So thank you so much for being a part of this effort and movement. I thank you all for your support, and I look forward to continuing to work together.
To all of you that continue to fight for the freedom of Iran, please know that there are so many of us that are with you. We stand united in the cause of a free Iran, in the cause of the elimination of that terrorist regime that has repressed and oppressed the Iranian people for decades. Iran will be free because of your efforts. Iran will be free because the Iranian people are demanding freedom. And this terrorist plague that has hurt and destroyed so much and so many for such a long time will forever be in the heap of trash and will be remembered as one of the darkest moments, not only in the history of Iran, but in the history of this planet. Thank you for your activism. Thank you for not tiring. We are with you, and victory and freedom will arrive, will reach Iran sooner than many think.
Respected members of Congress, let me thank you for your presence and your support, as well as your bipartisan efforts for a decisive policy against religious dictatorship ruling Iran. Your outstanding position as a representative of American people is very valuable. Iranian people want a firm policy vis-à-vis nuclear program of Iranian regime. Also with Raisi, who is responsible for 1988 massacre of political prisoners, the U.S. Congress, in addition of his boycott, must call for his prosecution and his trial. Thank you very much for all of you.
این نبردی است تا پیروزی از درازنای روزگاران، و آغازگران دانایی تا شورشگران سرکش در نبض خیابان. بی‌گسست، پایا، بالیده و برافروخته، در پی نگاه‌های روشن و شرافت افراشته قهرمانان، جویندگان همیشه آزادی. هیاهوی قزاقان و گزمگان و غوغای توپ و موشک را به هیچ گرفتیم. در سنگرهای فرو ریخته و سوخته برخاست از خاکستر خود دشمن را به مساو خواندیم. در تاب پرچمشان نام ایران را فریاد زدیم. سنگر به سنگر، سنگر به سنگر، سنگر به سنگر، خیزش به خیزش، خیزش به خیزش، ایستا بر صخره ها، روان در جنگل ها و دشت ها و شهر. جانهای جاری در زندگان، ایستادگان تا به آخر، ستارگان راه گشا بر چکاد وفا و خیزابه های خون بگذشته از جان و مال. بر مدار دارها و سوگندها و در امتداد رگبارها و آتشها، هوشیار و ناخاموش برای نبرد فرجامین، به دست شیر خورشید سوار برای بردماندن خورشید آزادی، خجسته آزادی.